Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk, and I apologize. These episodes have been a little bit inconsistent over the last month or so. I've spent the last 3 weeks working a little bit here and there, but also had a couple trips for about a week and a half as well. So I've been a little inconsistent, but I think with the start of the fall, or at least the school year, hopefully I'll fall into a little bit more consistent pattern moving forward. So I appreciate your patience and grace with that. The focus for this episode of God Talk that I want to focus on is how we measure and how we judge things, because there's a lot of credibility that's ultimately based upon, are we consistent in how we apply the law, how we apply work ethics, how we apply what we allow one kid to do versus the other kid. When we're inconsistent in how we apply the things that we allow or do in life, then honestly, we lose credibility. And, when I was a kid, going back to school, it's back to school time, one of the things that you always had to have is you had to have matte pencils, crayons, scissors, glue, usually like a compass and a protractor, and a basic ruler. Back when I was a kid, they had these like little plastic ones, inches on one side, centimeters on the other, and it was probably just like a 6 or 8 inch ruler, but it fit in your little ziploc bag or whatever that was attached to your 3-ring binder. And rulers were important because rulers are used to really determine reality. Because without a ruler, well, you don't really know how big something is or how small something is. Ask that to any fisherman. Most fishermen don't measure their fish after they catch it. They just have stories about the fish they caught. And one thing that's interesting about a fisherman, if you don't get them to measure their fish, they're not going to underestimate by guessing the size of their fish. They're always going to overestimate it. And the more time that goes by, that fish will somehow grow bigger and bigger and bigger. You've probably fished with someone like that before. But a ruler settles once and for all what reality is. A ruler will determine, no, that is a 16-inch fish. That's not a 17-inch fish that's going to grow into 18 inches. I fish with a guy who likes to overestimate his fish all the time, so I've declared that unless he's showing me a picture, I'm not even believing it. So I was on a fishing trip in the swamp and then down at the coast, and the first day I went out fishing in a kayak, and I didn't have my phone with me, and as truth be told, I didn't catch any fish anyways that first time that I went out. But then going forward, I took my phone at risk of turning the kayak over and losing my phone in the bottom of the kayak, just so that I could prove and I could document the fish that I was catching. Well, you can take pictures with certain angles with your phone, which makes them look bigger or smaller, but there's no replacing just having that fish laying next to a ruler in order to determine how big the fish is. Another way that fishermen determine how big their fish is by the weight, and they have scales that do the same. So rulers and scales, much the same, they're the basis for determining reality. But even with scales, especially, things can be manipulated. Reality can be manipulated. I don't know if you remember, it probably has gone off and on and still goes on today, but I remember for a while, I don't know if it was like a 60 Minutes or 2020, but they were going to gas stations and people's gallons of gas weren't really a gallon. Honestly, even more recent than that, Subway's foot-long sub was maybe an inch less than a foot long. And that doesn't seem like a big deal if like they're only giving you, 95% of a gallon of gas. But, when you add that up over time and time and time and time again of hundreds and thousands of gallons that you're selling, that becomes a significant profit for the gas station. I guess the same way for the people at Subway. So you can manipulate the scale in order to give you what appears to be a certain measurement, but in fact that measurement's not real, and it's been manipulated. We do this with the things we weigh ourselves on. It can be manipulated this way. Like I can take my weight at the end of the day and it's a certain weight. No, I'm going to take it first thing in the morning because that's going to give me the most favorable reading because I haven't eaten in 12 hours and haven't drank anything for 12 hours. It's not my real weight. It's my dehydrated, haven't eaten weight. Or if I really want to make myself feel good and manipulate my weight in the scale, I wait until after I mow the lawn for 2 hours, and then I swim an hour on top of that. And man, when I jump on a scale after that, I might be 6 or 7 pounds lighter than I was in the morning. It's not a real weight. You've just lost water. And as soon as you start eating and drinking, it will all come back. But things can be manipulated that way. Well, in biblical days, they would manipulate the scales so that a scale was balanced by a certain amount of weight on one side versus whatever you're weighing on the other. And when that weight is in balance, you know how much you're weighing or how much goods you have or so forth. And so you could manipulate that scale so that scale really, if you took the weights off, it wouldn't be in balance. Once again, if you remember the old weight scales, if you're old enough, there's that little knob, it wasn't a lever, but best way to describe it is a little knob that you would turn at the base of the scale, and you do that till the scale zeroes out, and then you could hop on. But if you have that like at a negative 5 pounds, then automatically everything that you weigh is going to be 5 pounds lighter than what it really is. So in biblical days, they would do that so that when people were weighing things, they were being underpaid for what was really what they were owed because the scales were being manipulated. Well, God talks about that in Proverbs 11:1. It says, "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him." So the Lord detests dishonest scales. He hates dishonest scales because it skews reality. It lies and it cheats to people who are being judged by those scales or weighed by those scales or paid by those scales, however you want to look at it. And so I say all this to try to set up a concept in everyone's mind. In the same way that we can manipulate, say, the scale we're weighing ourselves on, or just out and out estimate a wrong size of a fish, we can be very dishonest in how we judge things. In judging things is a way of determining reality. Judging things is a way of measuring things against other things. And the Lord detests those of us who have dishonest scales and dishonest judgments and measurements of people and of things. Think about it in terms of how you judge a friend versus a foe. If a friend does something that you that bothers you, you're going to cut him some slack. You probably will talk to him about it. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just kind of let it go, and if it stops, you won't even bring it up again. But if it's someone that you don't like, if they do that same thing, you will rip into them. You'll read them the riot act. In fact, even when a foe does something that we do like, as we look at it through a biased lens, a dishonest judgment, if you will, we may not like even something that was actually an appropriate deed, a good deed. Maybe your coworker did a good job at work on a project, but through your eyes, through your judgment, through your scales, it's dishonest, and you don't see it as being a good job. And I say it's dishonest because, once again, if a coworker that you are neutral to or a friend had done that, you would have been very congratulative of the type of work that they did. We have different standards for when we're involved in things and when we're not. If we're not involved in a project, it's very easy to be very critical of that project. But when we're involved in it, we take that criticism very personal, and we're probably willing to overlook flaws. I tend to be the opposite. Sometimes I'm more critical on myself than I am on anyone else. When I paint and I look at the painting work that I've done, I pick it apart for every flaw, every place that it got a little thin. Maybe I missed a spot or dripped a little paint here or there. But when I look at a normal wall or some work that someone else does, I just look at it to think, yeah, that you know what, it's good, and I don't pick it apart like that. So honestly, for me, my scale's a little skewed in that I tend to be harsher to myself than I am to others. But for many of us, we might be the opposite, where if we're involved in the project, we think it's appropriate. But when other people are involved in it, we're very good at finding the failures in it. One of the ways that I think today that we're very inconsistent in how we judge is politically. I remember, different scandals of the past, whether that was Bill Clinton with Monica Lewinsky or, what have you. People that were on the right, we impeached. They tried to impeach Bill Clinton for that. And I feel like now, whether you're on the right or the left, you don't judge fairly. Like if you're on the left, Biden gets a pass for when he says, he was asked about the fires in Hawaii when he was on vacation. He said, no comment. Well, listen, if George Bush had done that, in fact, I think it was Katrina was under George Bush, if I remember right. He didn't respond the right way at the right day and the right time, and he was just torn apart for that. But on multiple times, Joe Biden, who people on the left would say is very, or portray him as being very compassionate and so forth, that's not really the case. There's been multiple times where he hasn't been real compassionate about certain disasters that have gone on, certain places, certain tragedies, been very biased in how he judges certain situations, and rightly so. The people on the right get all over that. Wrongly so, people on the left ignore it. But I would argue that, with all these indictments coming out against Trump, I think people on the right, I don't hear a lot of defense of, well, that really wasn't a big deal. I just hear, well, no one's going after Biden for this or that, and especially the Hunter Biden stuff. Listen, that's called gaslighting. When rather than addressing the issue at hand, we point someone else's faults or something else someone else does. That's not judging by the right standard. And I as a pastor, as someone who, listen, I have a conservative bent. I understand that, and I think I should, because I think the Bible should. At the same time, for credibility's sake, I can't overlook the sins of one and point out the sins of the other. We have to be consistent. And Jesus talks about that. Like, you can't talk about the speck in someone else's eye unless you pull out the plank in your own. So, we should be talking about things that are going on politically on the right that aren't right and aren't appropriate. And we also should be, at the same time, talk about the things on the left, so that the scales are balanced and they're even. Remember, once again, the Lord detests dishonest scales, but it's accurate weights that He favors and that He blesses. I get with a whole political movement that it's more of a political movement than it is about any one person. So, people are just trying to preserve the movement without acknowledging maybe some of the faults of the person. But I would just encourage us as Christians that we have to be honest and upfront about it. And that might be very much as like, what? It probably wasn't right for my candidate to do this, but, at the same time, other candidates are doing the same, and that's not, that's being overlooked. Therefore, I'm going to choose to overlook it. Honestly, that's a balanced scale. I don't know if I agree with it, but it's consistent, right? That like, okay, yeah, I recognize there's faults here, but what about all these other faults over there? And so I think at the very least, politically, as Christians, so that we can have some integrity, we have to be willing to do that. Another way that it's hard for us to be balanced is really when it comes to our kids. And that works one of two ways. School just started. And oftentimes when the teachers might be complaining about our kids, we can get really defensive of our kids. Maybe our kid gets in a fight with another kid, and it's always the other kid's problem. And so I think for the majority of us, it's real easy for us to be unbalanced when it comes to like favoring our kids, taking our kids' sides and thinking that they're perfect. But there are some of us that are probably harder on our own kids than what we are on other people's kids. And we usually tend to think that our kids are always the one to blame and they should have done better. Once again, that we have to be balanced in how we look at things. And this ultimately comes down to something that we're taught in the Bible and that Jesus teaches. And that is, in the same way in which we judge, we will be judged. So if we're judging inconsistently, if we're judging unfairly against others because we don't like them or because we're biased to friends or politically or to our kids or what have you, then expect that we're going to be judged unfairly. But if you want to be judged fairly, then judge all things fairly. If you want to be judged generously in terms of being forgiven, then be quick to forgive other people's failings and faults. I think as we go back to school and everything heats up politically and just all the relativism that we have in the culture today, in which truth has become so skewed, maybe we just need to get back to that ruler, to that weight, to that scale, so that we can be certain that what we're looking at is really what we're looking at, and that we're consistent in how we apply that. For no other sake, because in the same way in which we judge, we'll be judged. And when we do that unfairly and biasly, we actually lose a lot of credibility. And as Christians, at least, that's something that we need to guard above all things, and that is our credibility, because our credibility is a reflection of the God to whom we represent. Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. I hope all of you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your week, and I look forward to talking to you next week. God bless.